What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates in the Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before I introduce my longtime friend, Gary Quesenberry, I got to first let everybody know where they can go get the podcast. On the audio format, anywhere you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever you find podcasts in the audio form, you can go there. Please subscribe and also click the automatic download button. That helps me with my analytics, and I would be really appreciative. Video on my website, mattcubbler.com. There's a section there for my podcast where all the videos lie. You can also go to my YouTube channel, Matt Cubbler, where all the podcast videos live as well. mattcubbler.com. That's where you can find information about me, my career, things I've done, things I'm doing, my speaking engagements, my book, A Brother's Love, a Memoir, that I wrote 14 years ago, and it's still going strong today. So if anybody wants to find out more about me, that's where you go. All right, man, without further ado, my man, Gary, what's up, brother?
Hey, how's it going, Matt? Good to see you.
You too, man. So a little history, everybody. I've had air marshals, former air marshals on the show. Gary Byrne, who's a very close friend of mine. He's actually been on twice. Great guy, great human being, fantastic firearms instructor, fantastic person. Author of two New York Times bestselling books, Crisis of Character and Secrets of the Secret Service. So I worked with a lot of really high level guys, but very few are as high level as Gary Quesenberry. And he was a training guy when I was in the Philadelphia field office, and he was at the training facility, which is real close to our office. So we would go there and train, and that's where I got to know Gary. And if you want to talk about somebody who understands personal safety, personal defense, firearms, he's your guy. So without further ado, what's going on in the world of Gary Quesenberry today?
Well, like you mentioned, the Federal Air Marshal thing is kind of in my rearview mirror now. It's I retired back in October. That'll always be a huge piece of who I am. But, now it's more focus on being an author, trying to help spread the word about personal defense, personal safety, situational awareness, the kind of things that keep people safe, and focusing on family life, being a husband, father, and just living on my little farm out here in the middle of Virginia.
Love that. I'm so jealous. Like, every part of me wants, and my best friend from the Army, and you're a military guy, so
yeah.
My best friend from the Army, who I literally spent just about every hour of 4 years with, Toby, he's my right arm, and still to this day is my right arm. He lives in the middle of Missouri. He used to live in Colorado. But like, we have this dream together, like buying, 200 acres and putting in like a firing range, an indoor firing, outdoor firing range, all the way out to a mile, and doing training. This and it's a dream that we had. And you're actually now, kind of living that dream. And I want to get off the grid some too. I need to pull back from the world for a little bit. We've spent.
Yeah, well, man, it does a lot of good. Since I left the Federal Air Marshal Service in October, I've dropped like 12 pounds just from getting outside and being physically active and doing things. I'm fortunate enough, when I joined the Army, I was 17 years old. I left Carroll County, Virginia, which is where I'm living now. And I've been gone ever since. So I'm the only person in my family that really left. And now that I've come back, reestablishing those connections with, my father, my three brothers, nieces and nephews, and being able to spend time with them and do the things that they love to do, it's really been mentally and physically, it's just been a blessing to me. So
people don't understand.
Get a chance.
Oh yeah, well, people don't understand when you're in the world of service, being a servant, to your community or to your country, and we've done it on all levels for as long as we've done it. I'm between the Army and police work. I'm my 33rd year, and for me, I think about that and I go, man, I think I'm run my course, right? Like I'm coming to the end of that line. When you decided to leave service, what was the mental process you went through, and what would it feel like? What was the day after? Did you feel different, or was it like a piece of you was missing?
It was, it was really crazy. Like, there was a discernible finish line, and I could see that finish line coming. I used to be a distance runner, back before my knees got as shot as they are now. But, you know, I kind of equated to that. I was in the, I was running that marathon, not the sprint, you know, so over a 28-year career, a little over 28 years, when the end came, I could kind of see the writing on the wall. You know, I always wanted to go out. I always said it from the time I started federal service to the time I got out, that I wanted to go out as strong as I came in. I don't want to let myself fall apart physically, mentally. I don't want to be that guy who leaves disgruntled. I felt that the Federal Air Marshal Service mission was an important mission. I still feel that way. You know, I felt that the job that I did and the effort that I gave it 110%, you know, as often as I could. And I think I made an impact on some of the newer air marshals coming in when I worked at the training facility. So at the end of the day, when I left the Cleveland field office, the government shut down the Cleveland field office because they were cutting back on certain things. So I left. I was a supervisor there. And I realized when I left that I was missing something, and that supervisory position that I was working behind the desk wasn't filling it. And I wanted to get back out and do something that I felt was important. So I went back to flying. I went to the Philadelphia field office, you know, where you came from. Great group of people up there. I got on a fantastic squad. I had great teammates, you know, and I was back out in my last a little over 5 years of doing the job. I was doing it how I started it. You know, I'm out there flying, you know, we're bouncing around the globe trying to do, you know, our thing as Federal Air Marshals. And it was very rewarding to me. But at the end of the day, you know, you kind of see the changes coming down the road, the changes in leadership and management, you know, the levels of motivation and the people that you work with. And I knew that when it came time for me to go, you know, as soon as I turned 50, that's what I was going to do, because I knew I'd be leaving kind of at the top of my game. You know, I still had a lot to give, but I didn't, like I said, I didn't want to go out feeling like you know, that my tank was empty, and that once I did retire, settle back in at home, that I didn't have anything left for my family and my friends. You know what I mean? So I think I struck a good balance there. I'm glad I went when I went, but you know, to answer your question about the day after, it was incredibly surreal, and I wasn't expecting to feel the way I felt. So my wife and I were very fortunate to find this little farm, and it actually butts up against my brother's farm. So, you know, between the two of us, there's a little over 100 acres of just, you know, Blue Ridge Mountains, and I love it here. So my wife was like, we really need to jump on this now while the opportunity is there. And in doing so, she lived down here since December of last year, and I still had a year to go before retirement. But that's the sacrifice we had to make to get where we wanted to be. I would commute, you know, back and forth from up there, back down to Virginia. It's about, you know, a little over 7-hour drive. And I did that for almost a year while my wife was settling in here in Virginia. So once the day came for me to retire, my last day in the office, I turned in my badge, I turned in my gun. You know, the SAC gives you your retirement creds and a nice little speech. And I got in my truck and I drove out of the parking lot. And it was a devastating feeling, knowing that I wasn't going to be there again, that I wasn't going to, you know, get back on another plane in that capacity, you know, to protect the public. And once I got back home, the first night I was here, we went out to dinner with my brother and his wife and my 2 little nephews. And my sister-in-law commented on the fact that I was being incredibly quiet, you know, and that something was wrong, something was different. And I couldn't really put my finger on it at the time, but over the first, I'd say, month, you know, in retirement, it was almost like a mourning process. Like there was such a huge part of me that had been a part of me for the last 28 years that was now gone, you know, just in the snap of a finger, it was gone. When I drove out of that parking lot, that part of me kind of died. And it was almost like a mourning process for that. But, you know, the good news is that process doesn't last very long. And once you get over that hump, you see, you know, what you have in front of you, how many good years you got left, and all the things that you can do with the experiences that you had and the way that you can help other people. And, you know, I feel like you're a lot like I am. You know, you want to turn a negative into a positive. So I started focusing on my writing, focusing on family, you know, like I said, just settling into the farm here, and I'm a whole lot happier for it now. But that initial adjustment was difficult.
That's, you know, I've heard similar type stories, but I've heard some people that were so, like you said, when you get to that disgruntled side, or that I've got nothing left in the tank,
Right.
The shift to retirement is more like a euphoria, because you know what, that cancer's off of me. But when you had a career that you had control of and impact in, and you felt like you were doing your best work throughout the entire time. I can only
Yeah.
imagine that that is kind of like almost like a divorce, or you know, like
Yeah.
it's sort of that period of like, oh shit, now what? And
Right.
so, but all right, I asked the same question to everybody, and I do this because as trained investigators, we don't always know who did it or what the motivation behind something was or whatever. So asking general questions opens up the suspect and or guest to answering a little bit more truthfully, or at least as the investigator, you can read that person a little bit better when you see kind of where they're coming from on a broad scale, and you can sort of narrow that down. So I asked one question, and it's a pretty broad question, and I asked the same to everybody: who is Gary Quesenberry?
That's yeah, you would ask that, right? So I don't know. I mean, I think at my base, you know, I'm a husband and a father. You know, I'm a small town guy. I always have been. I've always had that mentality, and now I kind of find myself come full circle back to that you know, to my roots, to that small town lifestyle, to my friends and to my family, but with the experience of someone who's, you know, worked in law enforcement in the military for, you know, almost 3 decades. And I've seen a lot of things. And I think that my experiences and what I bring to the table now, you know, as just trying to focus on being a family man, is a lot more, it's a lot more substantial, you know, and I think it's a lot more rooted in reality. You know, I think that me getting out and doing the traveling and doing the jobs that I did made me a stronger person mentally. And I think that that helps with me being, you know, better at what I feel is my primary job. And that's, like I said, being a husband and a father. So that's who I am.
I love that because I don't know if you would consider this about yourself, but when I hear you speak, I kind of hear everyone that's kind of like us speak. And the one thing that binds us all together is first of all core values and a love for our country and our communities and our families. But above that, I see an intentional purpose behind what we do. Like it's
Right.
not willy-nilly. It's always based on analysis and experience and reading a situation or assessing an area and
Yeah.
making a decision with an intent to have an outcome, right? So
The
you
whole
would,
situational awareness thing. You know?
and it's intentional living. I just had to talk to my nephew. Um, his grandfather died, and their family went through a really bad 2-week period his last 2 weeks, and he lives in Florida. He works for the Dolphins in sales, and he was home for all of this for the holidays, and he stayed with his grandmom, you know, after his grandfather died. Actually, when they were sick, he died from COVID, and so he was there, and he was sort of like the support system. And he's 25, and he's kind of lived a life where he's kind of had everything given to him. Like, not that he didn't work hard, but like if there's always a net, there's always a safety net.
Sure.
And him and his grandfather were the tightest out of all the kids, and he was his role model and his hero, and so he's gone. So having this, and I tried to explain to him like that, the things that your grandfather implanted into your brain and your soul will live forever if you allow it.
Sure.
That intentional desire to be all the things that you know he was putting into you every single day.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And his grandfather lived an intentional life, especially in the after he retired. And there's of the grandkids, they were all athletes in grade school, high school, college. I don't think he missed a single athletic event from the time they started playing Little League baseball or whatever, lacrosse, field hockey, whatever it was, until their last college game. And he intentionally planned out his life to be present in his grandkids' lives so that they knew how important they were to him.
Yeah.
So that when it comes time for them to have families, that's the seed that was planted, that family first, that be intentional, do things with a purpose, let people know that you care. Like that whole mindset, because he was lost in this, he's gone. And I'm like, dude, lean into that. Like lean into all the things you're feeling aren't sadness. Those are gifts. Those are little gifts that are popping into your brain, into your heart, that are making you sad, making you cry, an emotional response, but they're gifts that he's giving you.
Right. That he's been given his whole life.
Right. Like my brother died 32 years ago.
Right.
And there isn't a day that I don't think about my brother, and there isn't a day that I could cry. And that's not sad. That's a gift. That means he's still there. Like the presence, his magnitude is still felt.
Right.
3 decades later. Like, and that's when you talk about living an intentional life, and when you say you made an impact on other air marshals' lives, that when you break it all down, that's what we're here for. Like when Gary Quesenberry has his last breath, and I did and I'm going to continue on talking about all this other stuff, but this is just because I know you and I know how you think. I did a talk for a company, and it was like a sales and advertising company, and it was like one of their annual rah-rah retreats, and I was the keynote speaker. And I tell my brother's story, and I talk about how living intentional, and nothing about sales or marketing, but just how to live your life with a purpose, and why do we do things. And I asked the group, I said, what does your life mean to you? If you look at it from its totality, when it's all said and done, what does your life mean to you today, looking forward and looking backwards? What does it mean? And the owner of the company raised his hand. He goes, I don't know if I'm answering your question. He goes, but I've heard this said before, that a person dies twice. I said, what do you mean? He goes, the first time you die is when you take your last breath and they put you in the ground. The second time you die is when your name is spoken for the last time. And he goes, and then that's permanent, eternal death. And I thought about that a lot. And I'm like, I never want my name to not be said in somebody's heart or their mind or in a conversation. Like I live my life to have an impact so grand that no matter how far and wide I go, someone around this world is going to remember Matt Cubbler and speak highly of me forever. Like it'll just perpetually live on.
Yeah.
And I think when you think about service and the things that you've done in your last 30 years of serving our country and on many different levels, and now what you're doing with your books and your company and your family, those roots have been set. And now you're taking everything, the base that you have of your first half of your life, and using that now to expand upon it and touch 10x more that you could ever even have imagined.
Right. Yeah, that's the plan, and that's beautiful. What you said about the dying twice, and as long as your name lives on, then you kind of live on in a sense. So it's a good way to look at things, and it's a good way to plan out, like you said, the second half of your life. So, and that's what I look at. I retired at 50 years old, and I figure if I live my life right, I've got a lot of good years left. So it's the having the benefit of hindsight is really a blessing, and when you get to this point in your life, at 50 years old, I can actually look back at the mistakes I made when I was younger and the amount of time that I took away from family because I was focused on career, or that I was, the baseball games that I missed, or the wrestling matches, all these different things. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, my job is the most important thing because that's what puts food on the table. It's what keeps clothes on everybody's back and a roof over their head. And it was, it's an important thing. But in terms of it being the most important thing, that's one thing that hindsight has taught me, is that, there's a balance to be struck there. And that's what I'm kind of striving for in this, this second half of my life.
Let's talk about, we're in a vein of reflection right now. That's kind of what we're doing. So
yeah.
We talked a little bit beforehand about our families.
Yeah.
Now, as a father and a husband, I've been married. I've been with my wife since 1994, and like any other marriage, we've had ups and downs and highs and lows, and but never once was there a period of time where we didn't know this was forever, right? This is we're it, right? This is it. And when you know that, and then you build your family and you intentionally parent with a desired outcome of creating great human beings to go out in the world and represent you and your wife. Let's talk about your kids. I know that you're very proud of your 3 kids.
Sure.
And you were talking about missed time and reflecting on maybe missed a baseball game or this or that, I'm going to counter that with a statement after you talk about your kids, because I know exactly where I'm going with this. But you have 3 kids. Let's talk about each one of them and the path that they've chosen.
Okay. Well, we've just, because of the nature of my job, we've moved around a lot. And, I moved around a little bit when I was young, after my parents divorced and my mom remarried. So I understand those struggles. And we always tried to keep, life at home as normalized as possible, which wasn't always possible for me because I was gone so much, doing different things. But, my wife, God bless her, she was the glue that held everything together. So, we always knew that our children were resilient because there wasn't a place they could go in the country, whether it was at the Las Vegas field office, we moved to Cleveland, we lived in New Jersey, all these different places. They were able to adapt. They were able to make friends. They knew who they were as people and the type of people that they wanted to surround themselves with. They knew that going in. So that's what they always look for. So I'm very proud of my children in that fact that they were able to do that, because a lot of kids just can't adapt that easily. And I think a lot of it is because there's something missing at home as well. So they try to fill those gaps with friends that may not have their best interests at heart. But we got really lucky. Our friends, our children have always had a great group of friends. They always keep in touch. And once they graduated from high school, they decided that they wanted to start their own path. And my son, he's the oldest, Joshua, he joined the Army right after high school and went into infantry, and went through a couple of little rough periods in his life where he got out and he was trying to make some adjustments that didn't work out. He had just come back from Afghanistan, and he was dealing with what we talked about earlier with that transition period. And in the end, he decided that he would be better served just to go back in. So he's back in now. He's an E5, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. He's trying to, get himself into Ranger School and go that route. So I'm super proud of him. My oldest daughter, Elda, same thing. We were living in Cleveland at the time, just south of Cleveland, in a little town called Medina, Ohio. And she decided she wanted to go into the military. So she went into the Air Force. And then my youngest, who at the time decided, she was pretty blatant about the fact that she was not going to get into what she called organized dirt rolling. So we went to my daughter's graduation in San Antonio, Texas, her basic training graduation. My youngest daughter, Emily, was so moved by the transformation that she saw in her sister that she made the decision that she was going to talk to a recruiter as well. They all three they're very different. They're very different in their personalities and their end goals, but they're all very, they're all cut from the same cloth, so to speak. So Emily decided that she was going to take her own path. She joined the Navy. She's a linguist now down in Georgia. And, right now, all three of them are actually talking about making it a career, because they do have the understanding that they started young enough to where they could commit their lives to something for a period of, say, 20 years, get out and still be young enough to have that retirement, that experience behind them, and then do the things that they want to do with the rest of their life and still have plenty of time to do it. So super proud of all three of my kids. They're all out there doing their thing, serving their country, and I couldn't be, happier about it. So I
love that. And the reason why I asked that question, because we went down the path of reflection, and you were talking about how, there's some mistakes or regrets or things that you wish you could have done differently. And for me, I look at everything as every mistake or perceived mistake was meant to happen. Like where you are today, is a culmination of all of the events, not individually one of them changing anything, but collectively the choices that were made in your life. And when I look at my kids and I look at where they are and how they are and their success level and their resilience and their adaptability and their confidence and their morals, and I look at it and I go, that's exactly who we are. Like who they are is who we are.
Sure.
Your children are a reflection of the glue, the person that stayed. My wife was the glue. My wife's always been the rock. She's the person that makes everything work. If my kids would be homeless, they'd have no clothes and they would eat nothing but cereal and pizza. So that would be my world if my wife wasn't in it. Well, your kids are the perfect mix of your service side because they saw how important that was to you and to how you became who you are and who they saw you as. And their confidence in themselves probably came from the glue component, which is the daily reinforcement component that your wife gave them.
Sure, absolutely.
When you marry those two together, your kids are exactly who you were supposed to have them to be.
Right. Yeah.
Minus whatever missed Little League games, they got collectively to the point that you needed them to get to with all of the tools that you would want as a dad to have your kids to have.
Sure.
And I think that's the brilliant part of living with a plan and with intention. You know that you're not going to be right every time. You know you're not going to hit every ball out of the ballpark as a father.
Right.
But if you do everything the right way with the right intention and the right purpose, you get to where you're at. Right?
Because in the end, when you live that way, the positives are always going to outweigh the negatives, and the things like, you may have a tendency to look back on in a negative light, the moves and the hardships that you encounter whenever you're changing schools or moving into another house in another neighborhood, and you got to make new friends. Those negatives, are outweighed by the positives in the fact that, you make new friends, settle into a new home. And at the end of the day, I think all three of my children ended up with the mindset that it doesn't matter where they go or where they end up. They are who they are, and we are who we are, and they always have that to fall back on. And it feels good now at this point in my life to have this, this little area that I'm settled into now, know that this is going to be forever, and that it's here when they need it, when they need us. We're always here. And luckily, fortunately for us, now that all the children are back from the various deployments and things like that, they're all within a 6-hour drive. So we just came back this past weekend. We visited my daughter down in Augusta, Georgia, and had a great weekend. So, and then in a couple of weeks we're gonna drive out to Ohio and visit my oldest daughter, and we're waiting on my son to to finish up with his training and everything, and all of his preparations for trying to get into Ranger School and get out and visit him as much as we can. But they all come home. This past Christmas, as a matter of fact, and Thanksgiving was the first holiday that we've had here in the new house, with family and decorating the tree and, doing all the things that we got to do together. All three kids got to come home on leave. And it was really one of the happiest times that I've had in a long time. So it was
amazing, man. And I know this, and like I told you in the beginning, I don't ever have a plan. So how the show goes, the show goes.
Right.
But I do want people to know that. So if anybody's into, firearms and remembers the show Top Shot, Gary was kind of like a big name. Like he kind of got himself a little bit of a fame on that level with Top Shot. He was a cast member on one of the shows, and then came back in the All-Stars and did very well. And rightfully, I expected you to do well. And Jarrett and everybody else that was on the show. And the cool thing was, as a former Federal Air Marshal, there was a lot of guys I worked with that I knew personally that were on that show. And it validated to me the training that we received and the techniques and principles that we had as far as our tactics and firearms, that they were actually as useful and relevant to the mission as well as to a competition.
Sure.
What I'm saying? That the translation there made me really happy to know that everything that I have in my toolbox actually has the real world necessary experience. Plus it's also allows me to be, if I wanted to go competitive shooting, to knock people's asses off. Right. So talk about that a little bit, because I know that probably was an experience of going through that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that, every season of Top Shot had a Federal Air Marshal on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Whether people knew it or not, we didn't come right out and say, hey, this is Gary Quesenberry, Federal Air Marshal or whatever. We would just say like Department of Homeland Security Special Agent, or, they put something under your name when they showed you on screen. But I got a phone call from what I'm sure you probably know him as well, JJ Berkaza, big time world record holder, competitive shooter, also former Federal Air Marshal. He called me. He was on season 1. And he called me and he was like, "Hey, Q." Everybody calls me, Q, because Quesenberry is kind of hard for some people to pronounce. But so he says, he goes, "Hey, Q." He goes, "There's a show coming out. So we just filmed it. They're going to do a second season. It's getting ready to air. So you need to check it out. So I think you'd really enjoy this. You've got the type of personality that they're looking for, and you should, maybe put in an application for season 2." So I checked it out. JJ obviously did amazing. He finished 3rd in his season. Everybody loves JJ, just such a great guy. Yeah. But season 2 rolled around and he reaches out to me and he's like, "Hey, are you going to put in?" At the time, I was going through another move, going to another field office. And I'm like, it's not really, the best time right now. And at the time, I was working as the lead firearms instructor, at the training academy for the Federal Air Marshal Service. So I was kind of on the top of my game when it came to my firearm skills at that point. And it just didn't work out. Well, then season 2 wrapped up, season 3 rolled around, and I got the same message: "Hey, you should really think about this." So now I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, okay, I got a little free time. They wanted you to submit a packet and do a little video so that they could kind of check out your personality. I think for season 3, there were several thousand people that, put their name in the hat. They took the top 100 that they felt would be good on the show, brought us out to LA. Fortunately, I was one of the top 100. Took us out to LA, and then they did things like psychological interview. They did drug tests. They did all these different things. And you had to have an on-camera interview with the producers of the show to make sure that you could, actually, talk in front of a camera and not lock up, or have some sort of a personality that would fit in whatever big picture they had set up for the show. And out of that 100, they whittle it down to about 30. And then out of the final 30, they pick, the 16 people that they want to be on the show. And I got picked up for season 3. And I did pretty well. I did as well as JJ. So I finished in 3rd place in season 3. Had a great time.
Who was all on your show? I can't remember. I remember the All-Star one, but I can't remember who was all on yours.
Well, in season 3, it was the way every season they tried to structure it a little bit differently and make it a little unique, So in season 3, what they did was they tried to take 2 people that worked in similar fields and pit them against each other on separate teams. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Jarrett Grimes earlier. Jarrett and I worked together in Atlantic City. We were close friends, remain close friends to this day. We both got onto the show.
Okay, he was on your show. I wasn't sure if
he was on season 3. He was on red team. I was on blue team, and they wanted to pit us against each other. So you had 2 Department of Homeland Security agents. You had 2 competitive shooters. You had 2 female shooters. You had 2 military people. You had all these different groups of 8, 16 people pitted against each other. So, it was me, Jarrett Grimes. One of the people that a lot of folks remember from season 3 is Jake Zwig. He was a former Navy SEAL, caused a little bit of havoc and drama in the house, which I think is, that's what they wanted from him, because you can't have a reality show without that little bit of drama. So, and we had, we had Phil Morden, who actually turned out on the All-Star season. He won the All-Star season. Super talented guy. Let me see who else. We had Dustin Ellerman, who won season 3. He was on there. He's a Christian camp counselor.
Yep.
Who completely underplayed his ability, with firearms and just, marksmanship in general, to just go out there and dominate in a lot of different fields. So his overall well-roundedness is what won him that show. But it was a good time, and then I was fortunate enough to get invited back for the All-Star season, where again, I finished 3rd. So I'm just kind of locked into that 3rd place position. But, aside from
who won that year? The All-Star, yeah.
The All-Star season was Phil Morden.
Okay.
Who I was on season 3 with.
Where did Chris? I can't remember his last name. He was in my class in basic.
Chris Sereno.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris Sereno finished 2nd. So him and Phil went head to head in the final. He finished 3rd, and then Gunny Zins, who former Marine. He's a championship bullseye shooter. He's a phenomenal guy. He finished 4th. So it was us 4 in the finale for the All-Star season. But that was a fantastic opportunity, and like you said, it got me a little bit of, which isn't what I was seeking. I've always enjoyed competition. I've always enjoyed putting myself out there and trying to see what I can do against different people. I still do it to this day. My nephew and I are signed up for an archery tournament locally here that we go and shoot every week. And I just have a lot of fun with it. It drives me, to be better at what I do in terms of marksmanship and things like that. But Yeah, it was a great experience. It gave me the name recognition that I needed as sort of a jumping off point for the things I set up while I was still an active Federal Air Marshal. I was kind of looking forward to the day when I do retire. I want to have things in place that I can sustain myself and my family while I'm waiting on that government check to show up, with the pension, which by the way has not shown up yet. But yeah, I started Q Series LLC, and my name recognition from Top Shot helped me with that. And that's a company we designed. I designed a concealed carry holster.
Great holster, by the way. I use it.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. And it's really taken off. Like, that holster is super popular with undercover law enforcement agents around the world. Like, it's carried by the secret police in Israel. It's in Austria, Australia, all these different places. We sell them all over the world. So I'm really blessed to have that. And I don't think it would be where it is without it coming off the back of that Top Shot experience and that name recognition that came along with it. So, I did that. I've recently, since I retired, started a new company, Quesenberry Personal Defense Training, where I teach my situational awareness class. I've got some firearms classes that I'm putting together and things like that. Just stuff to keep me busy, keep me kind of in that field where I don't feel like I'm completely separated from what it was that made me who I am for 28 years. And, just try to stay as active as I can in it.
Well, I think one of the cool things about our world that we've lived in, that we've participated in, and the opportunities that have come from that, yours being on a TV show twice, and having that exposure and that ability to share with the viewing populace who are into that kind of stuff who you are, which is the same people that would be interested in firearms training on the outside world. And so you were smart enough, and I think not everybody has the forethought to figure out what the next step is before the next step comes.
Right.
And I mean, I've been building different things for, I've been an entrepreneur for 12 years and had 4 patents and own businesses and have a equipment manufacturing company. I've speaking business. I've podcasts. I do a lot of different things, but they all sort of grew into another, grew from another.
Sure.
But it was all with the intention of, when I'm done my career in law enforcement, that I have something, A, that I'm good at, and B, that I can build my base so that when I start, I'm not starting from zero.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because starting from zero when you have no money coming in.
Yeah.
or
with no plan,
right.
No path that you can follow to get you where you need to be next month or next, year.
I think what's cool is, I wrote a book 14 years ago, but mine's a memoir, and it was
right
about a bad period of my life, or a sad period of my life, and recounting all that stuff. But I didn't have to research anything. I lived it. So I just rewrote my life on paper. When you decided to become an author, and for everybody that doesn't have a copy, I'm going to put the links to all your stuff in the show notes, so that everybody can go to your website, can order holsters, can order books, can order training, whatever they need. When you decided to write this book, let's tell people, because a lot of people think they have a book in them, right?
Yeah.
The process, mine was a self-published thing, and mine wasn't. I didn't have anybody that gave a shit about whether or not Matt Cubbler was writing a book, so I self-published it, and it did very, very well. And I've kept it in a self-published world so that I control all the rights.
Right.
But yours is a little bit different, where you're with a publisher that you have a book deal with, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
How did your journey to start writing a book begin, and what has that process been like?
Well, it started off as a class that I was tasked to teach. So, and it actually just came up in conversation. I was teaching classes to a group of instructors in Kentucky, and they were looking for classes that helped other instructors identify and correct shooter deficiencies, which, as an instructor, is one of the hardest things to learn, because a lot of instructors get out there and, they just regurgitate what they had heard someone tell them. Stop slapping the trigger. You're not focusing on your front sight, without really being able to dissect that shooter. You don't look at what's on paper, you look at the shooter. So they had me come out and teach a couple of classes, and they asked me, in one of the classes, what was the most important skill they could learn you know, in terms of ensuring their own personal safety. And I'm sure when they asked the question, they were asking it from the perspective of, you know, they're thinking that the answer they're going to get is somehow going to revolve around some, you know, some high speed self-defense move or some secret that the Federal Air Marshals know about firearms and the deployment of firearms in a combat situation that could help them save their lives in a fight. And that just wasn't the answer they got. The answer they got was, you need to practice your situational awareness, because I don't care who you are, what you're doing, you know, what your line of work is. If, you know, you could be a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you could be the world's greatest, you know, shooter or whatever. You can't fight what you can't see coming. And I tried to emphasize that fact in that course, and that resonated with them. So they wanted me to put together a course specifically dealing with situational awareness, what it is, how to build it, how to incorporate it into your already existing lifestyle. So I sat down, you know, pen and paper, because I'm old school like that. I have to have, I've got, you know, notes and stuff everywhere. But I started writing out what I felt the most important things that they could learn in terms of situational awareness. And it really went down a rabbit hole with, you know, like fear, what it does to your body, how to manage that, all these different things. And I come up with this, you know, as I'm putting together my syllabus for this course, I start looking at it and I realize, I'm like, wow, this really looks like a, you know, like a table of contents, almost like in a book. So I turned it into that. I turned it into a table of contents. And once I had this table of contents with all the stuff that I had in my head over a 28-year career, you know, in terms of personal defense and situational awareness, I've got this on paper now. And then I just start writing every day. You know, I decided I was going to sit down at my computer. I'm going to write, you know, 500 to 1,000 words every day. And I would start with, you know, chapter 1, this is, you know, what we're doing. And then chapter 2 and chapter 3. Next thing I know, I had about 60,000 words. And I put it together in a manuscript. I didn't have any experience with this, so I didn't know what to do with it at that point. So like anybody, you know, I get online, I start Googling things. I read a ton of books on self-publishing, you know, how to land a publisher. Do I need an agent? Do I not need an agent? All these different things. So what I did was I just took the manuscript at the end of the day and I started sending it out to different publishers who took direct submissions without the use of an agent.
Right. And
a lot of people, they just didn't answer you back. It just goes out into the middle of nowhere and you just never hear back from them. And there was one company, YMAA Publications, that took a look at my manuscript and I got an email back. So the email that I got back was not what I wanted to hear at all. And the words "unfit to publish" was actually used in the body of the email.
They are brutal. Oh my God, they are brutal.
They're the most honest group of people I've ever met in my life. But with that being said, you know, and I got several rejection letters, you know, and I'm not the kind of dude that's told no and then I'll just quit. You know, I'm gonna keep trying to make this better. I'm gonna keep hammering at it until I can get, you know, until I can get some traction on it somewhere, or at least get pointed in the right direction that I need to be moving in. So luckily, YMAA Publications, the editor who had read over my manuscript, sent me a separate email. And he said that you have a lot of really good information in here and it falls in line with what we do at YMAA Publications, which is basically self-defense books. And he said that if I look at my career, you know, and all this stuff that I've learned, I'm trying to shove everything into this one, you know, what started off as a class, which luckily that never came to fruition because I would probably just confuse the hell out of everybody involved. But because I'm trying to, you know, like, it was like pouring a gallon of water into a shot glass, you know. I've got this much room to work with on a manuscript and getting a book published, but I have all the stuff I'm trying to pour into it and it ended up just making a giant mess, right? So he told me, the editor, his name's Dorn Hunter, fantastic guy. I still work with him to this day. He said, if you look at your career as a Federal Air Marshal, you know, people are interested in that and they want to know, you know, what it is that you have that they could take away to make themselves safer. And he said, just looking over your manuscript, the one piece that I pull out of that is you're really good at spotting situations that could possibly turn dangerous and then mitigating that, you know, through your training. So he said, situational awareness is kind of like the Federal Air Marshal's superpower. And if you could somehow distill that down into another book, that just focuses on that. Forget about the other pieces, and the firearm stuff and all the kind of gung-ho hoorah talk, to pump people up and try to motivate them. Take that instructor piece out of it, and just focus on the situational awareness piece and write it for, somebody who's just a common person. They're not a cop, they're not in the military, but they have a vested interest in the safety of their family. What would you tell that person? So I took that information, I took my 60,000 word manuscript that I had, and I chopped everything out of it that I didn't need. And I ended up with about 15,000 words, which is almost nothing, and that was the core of my book. And then I just stayed with the situational awareness thing and built off of that, those core components that I needed. I'd broken it down into 3 separate phases. For situational awareness to work, you have to know your enemy. You have to know what you're up against. So that was, and I broke the book down that way, like into 3 separate phases. So phase 1 is understand the threat, know what you're up against. Phase 2 was building your situational awareness, all those little basic building blocks of situational awareness that we learned, in the academy, about Cooper's colors and the OODA loop and all these different things that people, it confuses some people. And, I tried to put that out in the simplest terms. And then the third part of the book, the third phase, was building your personal defenses, like taking what you know about the enemy, what you know now about situational awareness, how do you put that into a personal safety program that you can incorporate into your daily life to make yourself safer when you're just walking down the street. And that's how it ended up. And then, about a year and a half later, I'm opening up a box. It's full of my books. And it was a really good feeling. I actually signed a 5-book contract with YMAA Publications. So book 2 in the series is for parents who want to teach their young children, say between the ages of 4 and 12. Not necessarily about situational awareness, because it's a hard subject to talk about with a 4-year-old, but what can you do as a parent to build the skills they need to later on in their life incorporate, and that's what the second book is about. It's for parents who want to try to instill these little skill sets that their children will need when they become teenagers and they start seeking their independence, to be safer and be more aware of their surroundings.
It's funny that you wrote that book, because unless you live this world, unless that's your everyday,
right?
When somebody learns something, it's like the guy that went to a weekend jujitsu class seminar, who now thinks he's a black belt jujitsu guy, right? He couldn't teach anybody jujitsu if he wanted to teach him jujitsu, but he knows a move or two now that if ever perfect worlds aligned, the planets are temperature is perfect, no rain, it might work. A parent, similarly, if reading your book, may know how to incorporate that into their life, because you put it in a way that they can do, but they would never be able to reteach that same concept to their child in a way that would be resonating within them.
Right.
So writing that book is almost like you're giving them the recipe.
Yeah.
So that their kids can figure it out, because you've proven it, right? So right. I think that's cool.
Yeah, and I've tried to look at the long game on this whole thing. So the first book is just a generalized, this is situational awareness, how it works, how you apply it to your life as an adult. The second book, like I said, is for parents to teach their children about the tools they need to be situationally aware. And the kid doesn't even need to be necessarily aware of what it is they're learning. Like, in one of the sections, I talk about having a game night and playing games that build, the cognitive skills that kids need, like memory. Just a simple game like memory. I play with my nephews all the time, and it builds that, that pattern recognition and the recall skills. We work together with them on flashcards, with descriptive words like tall, short, angry, happy, sad, all these different things. Because if something ever happened in a child's life, a young child like that you as an adult need to kind of drag information out of them, those descriptive words are what's going to paint the big picture so that people can look into what happened. And, in my first book, I talk about a situation with my own family, that happened when I was, first became a Federal Air Marshal in Las Vegas, and someone targeted my children. So, looking back, like I said, having the benefit of hindsight, it was that event that really changed the way I live my life and made situational awareness so important, you know, with the way we did things. And I'm happy now that I can take that knowledge and kind of pass that along to people in a way that hopefully, you know, helps them out as well. So
I think there's a lot of people out there that don't, how do I put this without offending half the people that listen to this, that are happy not knowing what's really behind the curtain in the world.
It's the whole ignorance is bliss thing. You know, a lot of people live their life with, you know, not necessarily knowing that that's the way they're living it, but that's the way they're living it. So,
and I think there's this almost if you were to tell them that the boogeyman exists and all these threats that actually exist, there's constant threats within our world, just in our local communities, whether it's, you know, why do you sit in this spot in the restaurant? Like my kids are always like,
right.
Dad, why do you always sit this way? I said, because I look at, as I'm walking in, I'm literally looking at every single person.
Sure. Reading the room.
Absolutely. And I know exactly if somebody sort of pops out and my brain says, that guy, keep an eye on him. I'm not saying it out loud. It's like a computer program that's just constantly on run.
Right.
And I sit in a place where I can see everybody that I just saw and limit everybody behind me as much as possible, right, so that I know what my scenario is going to be if and when something were to happen. And when that becomes just second nature.
Sure.
But for most people in the world that have never had to experience the stuff we experience, that's something they have to physically force themselves to do to become habitual.
Right.
And absent a blueprint or an instruction manual or anything, they're going to do it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, and that's what I try to lay out in the book is that blueprint, you know, of how to make it habitual and how to make it, you know, something that you do second nature. One of the things that I brought up in the book is a lot of people, when they think about situational awareness that haven't worked, you know, in the fields that you and I worked in, you know, I always think back to that scene in the movie, The Bourne Identity. You know, they're sitting in the diner. He's sitting there across from the girl, the main female in the movie, and he can't remember who he is. He don't know his name, but he's like, I know the dude at the counter weighs 215 pounds and knows how to handle himself. I know our waitress is left-handed. I know the best place to find a gun is in the gray truck in the parking lot. I've memorized all 6 license plates, you know, in the parking lot. And how do I know how to do that? And it's confusing to him. And a lot of people think that that's what situational awareness is, but it's not necessarily. It can look like that, you know, at a certain point, but how you get to that point is completely different, you know, and you always start off with just, you know, listening to your intuition, because at the end of the day, we're the only animals on the planet that will look danger straight in the face, know that it's a dangerous situation, but try to rationalize it, you know, and we try to see the best in everybody around us. And we're like, that person would never hurt me, or, you know, I got a bad feeling about this guy, but I'm sure it's just this, or it's just that. And you allow yourself to get closer to that person. And then you act shocked when that person does hurt you. You know, so situational awareness is, you know, the ability to take environmental cues, listen to your intuition, and then take these little environmental cues that you get when you walk into a room or you're driving down the street, and use those little bits of information to accurately predict the actions of others. Because like you were talking about, you walk into a restaurant and you sit in a certain spot, you've already looked at everybody you walk past. As you're doing that, there's like a little mental checklist, you know, and you're kind of putting people into one or two categories. Are they a threat or are they not a threat? You know, and in the majority of your everyday life, you know, you can walk into a room, you walk into a department store or anything, and the huge majority of people that are in there are non-threatening. And it's just always the way it's going to be. But that can turn on a dime, and it can happen so quickly that if you don't recognize the other aspects of situational awareness, like where are the exits? Is there something I can use as an improvised weapon? If something happened, how would I get myself out of that situation? Because the avoidance piece is the only way in a dangerous situation to keep yourself 100% safe all the time. So, you know, people, I don't know, I think people have you know, an idea in their head of how situational awareness is supposed to look. But when you do peek behind the curtain and you see the nuts and bolts of the whole thing, it's actually a much easier process than you think. And it's something that everybody can incorporate. And it's not something that takes a whole lot of, you know, a whole lot of effort. people ask me all the time, if I could do one thing right now, you know, to make myself safer, what could it be? Do I need to go buy a gun? Do I need to, you know, take some training? Well, those things help. But the one thing you could do right now that would increase your, you know, your level of safety 80% is just take your head out of your cell phone when you're outside. You know, put it in your pocket, get your head up and look around, because, you know, the predators in this world, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that soft target. They're looking for the person that they can exploit or take advantage of. And if you're walking around with your headphones in and you're looking at your cell phone constantly, you're completely cut off from your surroundings. They see that, you know, like Ted Bundy said that he could tell his next victim by the tilt of her head. And it takes about 7 seconds for them to determine who it is that they're going to attack or who they're going to try to take something from. And if you just pick your head up and you look around, you automatically look like you're more sure of yourself. You look like you know where you're going. You look like you're aware of your surroundings. And that in itself makes you a much less appealing target to someone, you know, who's coming from that predator mindset.
Such a great piece of advice, because you get everybody, you know, I'm as Second Amendment as they come.
Sure.
Everybody should be allowed to defend themselves and their families. But I tell people all the time, like, I'm not an off-duty carrier. That's just not typically, because most of the time I was in the gym, I had sweats on. It was just my environment didn't allow me to necessarily have a firearm on me at all times. Doesn't mean I don't have a weapon with me at all times, but I try to tell people that 99% of, if you are in a gunfight, your for most cases, your situational awareness sucked. Like you got to the point where you are now in the middle of a life or death situation where there was probably things that you could have noticed or done to avoid that outcome.
Sure.
And having guys like Gary in the world helping explain that in a way that is tangible and then applicable in your personal life is how we change the landscape of, you know, victor or victim, right? So there's no, having been in a couple lethal weapons situations, I can tell you that the greatest wins of my life were when I was able to diffuse shit or identify stuff before it became a problem. Or, you know, we had the other day, and my chief pulled me aside, and we have a small college where I'm a cop, and I'm a cop in a 8-man police department. We have 5,000 residents. We have a small D3 liberal arts college. We're about 1,500 students, and it's 1.6 square miles, our jurisdiction.
Okay.
Very compact, small. And we had right at the end of summer, fallish timeframe, like September, October, I forget what it was. We had this, you know, the Westboro Baptist people that go around take the Westboro Baptist, but a little bit smaller group, but still just as radical.
Right.
You know, we're all burning in hell, like that message. And they go to different campuses around the country. They're local to us, but they go all around pretty much the Delmarva area in Pennsylvania, and go to campuses and get on their bullhorns, and they want people to react. That's their goal, is to then engage and call them lesbians or fags, or you're going to burn in hell because you have premarital sex, or you dress like a whore, or whatever. And then they preach some gospel that's twisted into fitting that narrative.
Sure.
Well, that was at rush hour on a Friday. And they were standing right along our main strip, very highly traveled road. And it turned into it could have been an extremely volatile situation. But having managed, I've managed many large events in my life. I knew exactly how to do this. So I deployed, it was me and another cop, 3 campus safety guys that have no law enforcement experience whatsoever, and my chief. And we had, the looky-loos of the cars, and almost had accidents. And there's frat and sorority houses along the main drag, and they had, every offensive song that was ever made in the history of ever was layered through like a discotheque size speaker out a window. And then in between each song was a fuck Donald Trump song. And then like there was this whole counter thing. And then all the students were in the grass, and they were closing in. But I was able to manage that situation because I was able to identify all the potential threats and reading people's body language and reading people's facial expressions and understanding where their threat tension level was going in relation to what they were saying, and interpreting that, and then being able to communicate with the radical Christian group, their leader. I pulled him aside. I said, here's how this is going to go. You're going to have your 2 hours unstopped. I'm not going to make you do anything. They're not going to interfere with you. We will manage all this situation. All I'm asking from you is this, is if you say something that creates a hostile environment for the 500 people that are surrounding you and any one of my officers, then I'm going to have to shut this down. I said, I believe in your First Amendment. You have the right to say whatever it is you want to say. But if you cross that line to where you're inciting violence, then I'm going to shut you down. And he was like, very fair. Thank you. And there was a couple times that it got like onto that line. I went over, I said, you got to, because they would each, there's like 8 of them. They would all each have their time with the megaphone. And I guess there was a new guy that wasn't quite sure where that line was, and he was getting to that line.
Yeah.
But that's what my best, that was a giant. I was so proud of myself that I took a very large and possibly volatile crowd and diffused it to where nobody got hurt, nobody got arrested, everybody left peacefully, and everybody went on with their lives. But that could have been a really bad shit show.
Oh, absolutely.
If it wasn't properly handled correctly. And I think that's, I have a gift to be able to do that because of 30 years of experience, but having someone just have the ability to walk into a store and have somebody get in their face or whatever, but being able to identify and understand where that person is on their threat level.
Yeah.
And having tools to either de-escalate that or to remove yourself, and understanding how to do all that is key. And that's where your book is so valuable. And Tom Gersbeck, remember him?
Yeah, I do.
So he's a good buddy of mine, and he was the bomb guy at the office when I was there. And
yeah,
he wrote this book, and it's kind of, when you said that you wrote your 60,000 book of everything.
Yeah.
He wrote that. I don't even know where it is. I have it somewhere, but his book is like every knowledgeable thing he has about a bomb is in this book. And it is so much stuff. And I'm like, dude, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not reading this whole damn thing. Like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
I said, but if anybody ever wanted to know about a bomb, that's literally the Holy Bible.
Right.
Like everything. And guys like Kelly Venden, who, obviously is an American hero. And,
very good friends with Kelly.
He was my second guest on my podcast. So like, he was guest episode 2.
Yeah.
And we've been lucky and blessed in our careers to work with some of the most amazing talents. I'm not anybody. You're not anybody. There are people that we worked with. Yeah. That make America who it is today, and nobody knows about it.
Because they're so incredibly humble about it that like you mentioned Kelly Venden. I knew Kelly Venden for a long time, and I just thought he was some good old boy from Texas, you know. And one of the guys I worked with, because I just got to Atlantic City, says, you need to ask him, to let you watch some of his DVDs. And I'm like, what's that all about? So I tell him, I say, hey, I heard you got some DVDs I need to watch. He goes, oh, you talking about my military DVDs? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. So he gives me a DVD, and it's about Acid Gambit and Rescue of Kurt Muse. And if anybody knows what that is, if you don't know what it is, do a little research. I'm not going to put Kelly Venden's, resume out there in front of you, but you can do a little.
He did it on my podcast, so it's episode 2.
Look at that episode. But you would have never known that this is the guy that I've been, because we show up early every morning, we go on little runs together and stuff like that, and work out in the gym and talk about family and firearms stuff. And he was kind of my mentor, getting me set up as a successful firearms instructor there at the academy. And I had no idea what his background was, but it's just because he's so humble. And to him, that's a piece of who he is, but it's not all of who he is. And I think that's incredibly important. And the guys who, like you said, are real, true American heroes, that's where they come from. That was a small part of what they did, but it's not, it's only a fraction of who they are. And, that really comes across with Kelly. And I learned a lot from that guy. He was a huge influence on the way I did things there at the academy and, for the rest of my career. But
he was in my office.
We've been very fortunate to be exposed to, those kinds of guys.
I tell people all the time, I had the Harvard education in law enforcement. Like I'm just a recipient of knowledge that I've taken. Kelly, who was literally, I saw him every day, and Jim Smith, who was our training guy when we first started the Air Marshal program. And I don't know, were you at the academy with Richard Cachochos, Q?
Yeah.
One of my best friends. He was my class leader in the Air Marshal Basic. And
Okay.
I had no idea. 2/3 of it was just some little Filipino looking guy. Like I'm just like,
Yeah.
And and I find out, because Hoot was obviously, people that don't know the movie Black Hawk Down, Norm Hooten was one of the head instructor guys in the Air Marshal Basic, and he was our head instructor when I went. And at our graduation, and I'd known Q was what he had done as far as his military career and involvement in Black Hawk Down, all that stuff. And we had heard about Hoot and what he did. And then later on, we had seen the movie, and then we actually sat down as a group, and Q actually broke down the movie version versus the real life version, which was a great insight to begin with. But Hoot actually gave a really emotional, our last group thing before graduating. He actually started to cry as he was talking to our group, and he's like, "You don't have any idea the amount of greatness you were literally training with every day and going to class every day, and with a guy that literally has done things that the world will never know about,
right,
to keep America safe." And he's just started to cry, and he goes, "There are very few people on this planet that I would die for." And he goes, "And you have, as your class president, one of them." And Q, of course, didn't want any accolades or anything. But I'll tell a quick Q story. So we used to, and he used to work he was actually one of the instructors at Air Marshal Basic, and I realized, screw it, I'm just going to go become one. So we had access to all the SAIC vans and stuff like that out in Artesia. And every weekend he would get a van, and we'd go to Roswell, and we'd go to the mall, go check out a movie, whatever we would do.
Yeah, the only thing to do there, basically.
Right, yeah. So I got introduced to credit card roulette.
Yeah.
And I had no idea when you agreed to participate in credit card roulette. I didn't know that it was I just thought it was like 8 guys. We all get an appetizer and a meal and a couple drinks, and $500, $600, $500, whatever it is. No, it was order the menu.
Yeah.
So we had every appetizer, literally there was like 12 of us, and there was probably enough food for 30 people. And we weren't eating any of it. The way Q plays credit card roulette is you order the menu. So I'm like, fuck. Oh my God. And I'm not, in my head, I'm doing carry to 2. Oh my God.
I'm never going to recover from this.
Right. Well, no, it gets worse. So, and we're going to wrap up here soon. I know you got a tight schedule, but it's funny. So he goes, all right, at the end, everybody gets their credit card, and the waitress puts her hands behind her back and is shuffling the credit cards up. And sure as fuck, I get picked. It was like $1,800.
Yeah.
Like it was an asinine. That's not even the worst part of it. 3 weeks later, we go again. Same thing, credit card roulette. I'm like, there's no way.
Yeah.
I could possibly get picked again. I did. So in a matter of 1 month, I had about $3,200 in credit card bills charges. Yeah. And I had to call home to my pregnant wife, and who's not working. And I'm a single income person. By the way, I messed up a little bit. I was trying to fit in with the guys. This is a
funny thing happened at lunch.
I had 2 lunches. I had 2 burgers, fries, and a couple drinks, and it was $3,200. Bye, click.
Yeah.
So that was my Q experience. And every couple months, he'll shoot me a picture of him at a restaurant, say, "Need your credit card."
That's funny. I had the same experience with Norm Hooten. At the time, he was leading the Air Marshal Service, had what was called the GRT, the Global Response Team. And I had gone down to be one of the instructors for the 416 course that they ran down there. And at the end of it, I wasn't part of the GRT. I was just part of the instructor cadre. And at the end of it, Norm wanted to go to this wing and beer place that was local down in Florida, and, have, wings and beer and let everybody just kind of hang out and tell stories and, unwind from a long, grueling week of training. And when the bill showed up, it was credit card roulette. And that was my first introduction to it. Luckily, I wasn't picked. So that was but the beads of sweat were starting to form when I realized what was going on and what that build was going to be for, it was like 40 guys down there between the GRT team and the instructor cadre and everyone else that had been involved. And man, I forget who picked that up, but oh my goodness, that was
all the whiskey.
Oh yeah. Just a hell of a hit on the credit card.
Oh yeah, I felt it. I think I'm probably still paying interest on that.
Sure. Yeah. So for the people that don't know, that are listening, that don't know, if you ever have a chance to play credit card roulette, don't.
Yes. Oh, one last thing. So I'm out with 3 of my buddies, and the one guy goes, and no, I come out. I said, let's play credit card roulette. They're like, what's that? I said, we all put our credit card in, and it was $80 or whatever it was the total. But he's like, all right, cool. And I was willing to spend $80 for my friends to go out. We went out to grab some beers and wings, and sure shit, waitress pulls my credit card. I'm like, I can't win. I will never, ever, 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 ever play credit card roulette again.
Credit card in your pocket. Cut them up.
Yeah. All right, buddy. First of all, thank you for being on the show.
It was my pleasure, man. It was good talking to you. We haven't talked and caught up in a very long time, so I'm glad we had the opportunity.
And I want everybody to know that when I bring on people that I believe are experts in whatever field it is, I truly do believe that the value that they bring is going to benefit your life. And, I've had a lot of really top level military and law enforcement guys come on the show, and Gary is at the very top of that list when it comes to his knowledge and his understanding of his expertise, which is many things, but mostly in keeping you safe and teaching you how to do that. So Gary, where can people find you online? I'll put all the links and everything in the show notes as well, but where can they find you?
Okay. So I have a website, which is GaryQuessenberry.com. GaryQuessenberry.com is where you can, pre-order the books. Book 2 in the series. Book 1's out now. You can order signed copies on the website. Otherwise, you can find the book anywhere books are sold. You can also look into what I call the Heads Up situational awareness training class that I put on. And that carries you to a link where you can actually message me and we can set up training if you have a group of people or something that would be interested in sitting down and learning a little bit about situational awareness and how it pertains to your personal safety. So GaryQuessenberry.com is kind of like the hub for everything. We mentioned earlier the concealment holsters that I make. Those can be found at QSeriesLLC.com. And, I have Quesenberry Personal Defense Training on Facebook, and then I'm also on Instagram. So, all those different places just kind of lead you to me, to the books, to the training, to the holsters, the whole 9 yards.
So for the people that on the holster, just, holsters are typically, I wish I had one in here, kind of bulky, no matter how you look at it. There's leather, there's plastic, there's hard plastic, there's soft plastic, there's nylon, whatever you're using as a holster. It's never ideal, and it's always some level of not concealed. And the Q series, what I found with yours is I'm a simple guy, and I don't like a whole lot of bells and whistles, and I don't want to have extra bulk. I'm 6'3", 250. It's not like I need extra bulk. So when I'm carrying, your holster is so unassumingly secure and low profile, so that it doesn't add anything to your actual firearm profile, that makes it so simple yet so, and I'm pissed off I didn't come up with it, but that it's for guys like me who are trying to be as efficient and less presentive with my firearm as possible. And I love the holster. I love the safety of it. I love the retention of it. I love everything about it. So if anybody wants to get
I've actually, I haven't really told anybody about this, but I'll go ahead and mention it on your podcast. This is a prototype. This is the holster right here, but this is a 3D printer prototype of the newest one that we're coming out with. Everybody is asking for a Q series. We call them stealth holster for the Springfield Armory Hellcat. So this is the prototype for that. And we're right now talking to the tooling guys. We're getting ready to start production on this one. So right now we have them for every model of Glock. We have them for the M&P, the M&P Shield, the P365, the P320. We'll have them we have them already for the XD and the XDM. Most of the polymer frame concealed carry guns, or the guns you find most commonly in law enforcement. Right. But like I said, everybody's been asking for this one, for the Hellcat. I picked one up myself, one of the Hellcats. It's a fantastic little gun, and we're we're looking to get this done and have it out to the public by the time the Ohio Tactical Officers Association show rolls around in June. So that's the plan, but we've been keeping that under wraps. But since so many people have been asking about it on the subject, I figured I'd go ahead and mention it.
Hey, exclusive to the 2 Dates in a Dash podcast. Gary, don't go anywhere. We're going to talk offline, but I want to close out the show. But first of all, thank you again for being a guest, for catching up and educating the people that may or may not understand what the word situational awareness means, but understand now that it is important to have in their life, whether they're law enforcement or they're just an average Joe who just wants to keep their family safe. I think it's important.
Sure.
Everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of the 2 Dates in a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Don't forget, you can go to mattcubbler.com to learn more about me. And when you go to subscribe to the 2 Dates in a Dash podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the automatic download. I thank everybody, as always, for being a fan of the show, for sharing it. And, I try to be as broad as I can be with my guests. But if you haven't noticed, I do have a little bit of a affinity for the military and law enforcement side, because I think when it's all said and done, there are certain jobs in this world that deserve a little bit more a higher pedestal. And that's the people that keep us safe and give up aspects of their life to do that. So thank you. God bless, and go out and be kind to one another.